Can you believe that we're coming into the 8th season?
No.
In Season 7's intro, we talked about the fact that we are Trinitarian, that we're Calvinists, and that we believe that everyone is saved the same way. Abraham was saved the same way that I'm saved and you're saved. What other core issues do we stand by?
That, yeah, all the solas. Because we recognize those as core hermeneutical principles. They're like signposts in the road.
You and I are both Sabbatarians. We both keep a kosher diet, and we celebrate the biblical festivals. People have said that we're part of the Hebrew roots movement. Other people have said we're part of the Messianic movement. I see that the idea of practice being different in all sorts of denominations, which is why I consider myself a non-denominational Christian.
If there's, it's worthwhile if there's even a single person out there that hears a discussion and, you know, through our discussion, the Holy Spirit like quickens that person's heart on a specific topic, maybe helps them in a way that they've been wrestling with the word and trying to understand.
We have faith in Yeshua. We have faith in Jesus Christ. We're saved by faith alone, justified by faith alone. There's no work will save me.
I think we're gospel roots. We're gospel roots. In other words, we go back to the core promise of the gospel in the scriptures, and exemplified, like Paul says, in the promise, in your seed all the nations of the world will be blessed.
Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. This is Messiah Matters number 337. Forgot to take my allergy medication, so this could get interesting. My name is Caleb Haig.
And 3 days without a furnace now? Because our furnace has failed. It's pretty cold. We have little space heaters, Baruch Hashem, so we have power and we have warmth in some places. But yeah, it's looking like we're going to be needing a new furnace here. And I'm Rob Vanoff.
There you go. I was wondering when that was coming. You're keeping me on my toes.
I'm not practiced.
This show is going to be dedicated to Lou Draper, who is now with the Lord.
I saw that. Oh, I wept.
Yep. Our hearts go out to the Draper family and to Erna. And but we are also thankful that the Lord has...
So someone in heaven is watching Messiah Matters right now.
Exactly. I think that we're the last concern on anyone's mind in heaven.
Hey, I don't know.
But Lou is with the Lord, and we are grateful that the Father took him home. As my uncle said at my brother's funeral, promoted to glory, right? Yeah. All right. Well... What up, everybody? It's been a little while. It's been a week. And Passover is now upon us. We've had some interesting emails. And so it's kind of interesting because I think probably one of the main topics that we'll talk about, and maybe it won't be a main topic, but it'll probably be the theme of this show, is our email from David McDonald. Now, David is a dear brother and a good friend. I consider him a good friend. He is one of the leaders of a congregation up in Canada. And we've been there several times, just a wonderful group of people up there. And those people are so dear to my heart. They live in one of the most beautiful places in the Americas, in my opinion. And just really, really great people. We always love it. And to go up there and see all those people. And people might remember that I mispronounced one of the family's names. Frank's last name.
Caleb.
And yeah, I know. Well, actually, it was his daughter who was really like, "That's not our last name." Anyway, so people who've been following this show for the past, I don't know.
They are so patient.
They're very patient. They have 9 or 10 or 12 kids or something like that. You know, and actually, I think that she is pregnant again, and I can never remember how many kids everybody has. Anyway, I told Frank that if Location and I have another baby, I wanted to name it Kraken after the Seattle Kraken, which he laughed at. But he is a huge Maple Leafs fan. And I was like, maybe you should try to figure out how to name your child like Maple or something like that. And he was like, I'm gonna look it up in Hebrew right now. Anyway, okay, all of this is off topic. Anyway, sorry about that. That's the rabbit trail for me for the day. Anyway, okay, so back to our good friend David. David wrote in, and I didn't actually grab his. Should we read some of his? Should we read some of his email?
Sure, it's great. I loved it. Thank you, David, for taking the time to do that.
Okay. Well, here we go. It's a very long email, which is fine. Actually, he did very well at being concise on what he's trying to say. And so since it's a longer email, what we're going to do is we'll read just a little bit of it, and then we'll try to sum up. Let me explain. There's no time. Let me sum up. Okay. It has been a long time since I've reached out. Okay. He says, topic 1, tradition. I know, so cliche to put the exclamation point after tradition. Okay. It's a reference to Fiddler on the Roof. The topic of tradition has been broached many times, many the time on your show, and with a little more frequency in the last few weeks. Actually, this is true. One of the things that I've realized is that in the past, I don't know, month or two, I've wanted to put something about tradition in the title of every show. So yes, this has been kind of a running theme for the past at least couple weeks, if not couple months. Off the topic, I want to make it abundantly clear that we are on the same page with respect to the primacy of Scripture. Tradition takes a back seat and should never nullify what Hashem has revealed in His Word. Therefore, when we are on this, when your discussion on tradition revolve around or end up articulating this truth, I can say amen. However, many times the comments leading up to the conclusion are either 1, said in such a way that I must be misunderstanding, 2, incomplete so as to paint a fuzzy picture, or 3, not completely thought out. Recent comments have had me lean.
I think that third one is a big one.
Yes.
That third one is spot on, David. Thank you. And I appreciate David's careful and kind and thorough skill in communicating. But I totally agree that third point, I'm guilty of that, conflating terms.
So now you can tell that David is a smart thinker. He's also taken Greek at TorahResource Institute.
And he knows good coffee.
That's true. Yes.
So that's to his account.
So what he ends up doing is he goes into paradosis in the Greek, the word tradition. He references Mark 7:5, Mark 7:8, Galatians 1:14, 2 Thessalonians 2:15, and 3:6, and then juxtaposes it to the
nice word, Caleb.
Thank you. Yes.
Juxtaposition.
Yes.
Nice. This is I can tell already. This is going to be a good episode.
We're on fire already. Basically what his beef is here. Let me just get down to it.
Where's the beef? Where's the beef?
He's saying that that tradition is something that is handed down. And that we are not necessarily talking about, so he brings up the comment that I made about the person who said that they didn't have any tradition, but then ties their tzitzit, each of the 4 tzitzit in 4 different ways so that he's not holding to a tradition. And what David is saying, this isn't tradition. This is actually custom. Tradition is something that is handed down and generational. That is, it might be man-made, but it is handed down nonetheless. So if a person just makes up something that they do on a regular basis, or is their custom, it's custom, not tradition.
Right. And one of the points I would like to insert here too is that with this particular individual, let's say he just does this as an experiment one time, because often those of us, over the years, you have to replace your tzitzit, right? You can't just, they fall apart, they fade, they tear or break. So if he just did this one time and then next time did it differently, it's not even a custom. It's just an experiment. It's just right. a creative kind of expression that doesn't even qualify as a custom in my.
Okay, let's talk about this for a few seconds though, because ultimately, let's take the scenario of the gentleman who ties each tzitzit a different way, so that he's not following a tradition. So then the question is well, how are you tying them? Because ultimately, are you tying them per now I'm going to use the word tradition, that is a handed down tradition from Judaism. In other words, there's Ashkenazic, there's Sephardic, there's all these different ways to tie your tzitzit numerically.
Blue
thread, right? White
with or just all white. Yeah.
So I agree that what David is saying in this email is spot on.
Do they drag on the floor?
Right. I mean, I've certainly been careless with my use of the term tradition. However, I would say that and we see this within the Torah movement a lot. Okay, so for instance, Now, I've been really pondering, and I did a video on what is Messianic Judaism. I've really been pondering the term Messianic and what that means. I've also been pondering the term Hebrew roots. I also did another video on that.
And I looked it up. It has the word messy in it.
Well, that's true. But anyway, you can find those videos on Growing in Messiah, the Growing in Messiah YouTube. So I would suggest that within Messianic Judaism, what is actually being done is people are adopting tradition, not custom, tradition from various sects of Judaism. Now, whether or not that's right or not, I'm not going to comment on that. In other words, the fact that you have a synagogue service, it's modeled after something. If it's modeled after a synagogue service, and that is tradition that has been handed down. That's not custom. I mean, and this is there's nothing wrong with tradition. The way that I celebrate Passover may have some tradition that we've adopted. Certainly, it does. For instance, and I'll throw one out there. We still use Seder plates. This is a tradition. This is not obviously in the Torah. It's not it's not a tradition from the Torah. It's not a commandment. And it's not a custom either, because I didn't make it up. I didn't just say, oh, here's a plate, let's use this and we'll put these things here. No, it's a tradition that we adopted from Judaism. Now, whether or not that's right or not, that's a whole different conversation. But ultimately, what we're talking about is tradition versus custom. And what I would say is with the person who tied their tzitzit in 4 different ways, I would guess that most, if not all 4 of those tzitzit were tied according to a tradition and not a custom. Now, it's his custom that he tied all 4 different ways, and so he's making up a new custom.
Well, if he does it more than once, if he does it again next time, I would say, sure. Yeah. And technically, then, if he teaches someone else, hey, someone else is coming to the faith, and they're like, hey, I want to do tzitzit, let me show you how to do it, and then they start doing that. Now you have a little snowball that could potentially get bigger and bigger and bigger and become a tradition.
Agreed.
That's the way I look at it. What was I going to say? That this tension between tradition and innovation is a classic tension in the rabbinic world. It's in rabbinic literature, in the Talmud, and later in the Kabbalistic world, you have this issue of the people who it's kind of people tend to either side of that spectrum. The traditionalist is the person that is more fearful of innovation, because they don't know if the new thing, it would be acceptable to God. And so the idea is, I don't want to wear any new clothes. So this is why you go to, I've been to Mea Shearim a few times in Jerusalem. I think you've been there, Caleb. And they're wearing, it's like you're going back into the 18th century. I mean, they're wearing knickerbockers, and, in some of the places, it looks like they're wearing,
You're transported back to the 1600s.
Into the 1700s. Yeah. 17th century, 17th, 18th century, Eastern Europe.
Right.
And so why is that? That is because there's a fear of new things bad. Now, but the question is, what about new things that would help the lifestyle? And there's a great book on this called Defenders of the Faith by a famous Jewish sociologist. His name is Samuel Heilman. Samuel Heilman. It's called Defenders of the Faith. You should read it if you're interested in this. He's Orthodox Jew in America. He goes to celebrate the High Holy Days in like ultra Orthodox world in Jerusalem, and he feels like a complete outsider. I mean, he's Orthodox, he's halakhically observant and everything, but he goes to Jerusalem and he feels like it's a completely different world, like he's transported into a completely different world. And they accept him in, they learn that he's a researcher, but that he's kosher, But he talks about all these places where they're afraid of new things. It's all we must do. We must preserve what was handed down to us.
Right.
And then in the wake of the Holocaust, it's even all the more important, because it's like it was destroyed, and it's on us to preserve what the world tried to destroy. It's very moving. But then he ends up meeting a sofer, a guy who fixes tefillin and writes mezuzahs and Torah scrolls. And he starts interviewing the sofer, and he learns that the sofer is using high quality leather, new types of thread.
Innovation.
Yeah, exactly, Caleb. Exactly. Innovation. And he's like, wait, and
you're not allowed to do that.
Tell me about the difference between like this and 1,000 years ago, like Rashi's. He's like, oh, we make tefillin way better now. He's like, we've got way better materials. And so the irony was at the very heart of this ultra Orthodox, super conservative, anything new is suspicious community. At the very heart, the sofer responsible for correcting Torah scrolls, for making tefillin, for making mezuzot, is like has a cell phone and is innovating, is saying, hey, we can do it better because we've got better materials available. So that's the one extreme. The other is like the other side, and we see this in American politics too, is the tendency on the opposite side of the spectrum towards liberalism. That's going to be your Jewish expressions in America that are so liberal that the Torah is probably written by man. It's just man's tradition.
Right.
Jewish identity is really, between Hanukkah and the Holocaust, these are the big items and that we have our peoplehood around. And now maybe the state or the nation of Israel, but even then Jews in America are ambivalent. Are we pro-Israel? Are we against Israel? Are we pro-Palestinian Jews? That kind of thing. And so the idea is that everything's new because everything's now shaped by the whims and the fads of the world.
Right.
And so you can see how it's understandable that every community is going to be full of people that are struggling with, where are we on this spectrum between tradition and just not innovating anything new, or everything's new, out with the old. Everything old is suspicious because it's primitive and they didn't have information and it's backward, right? And we all have to wrestle through this space. So I really appreciate David's email, his thoughtful, carefully written email, to really say, hey guys, dig deeper on this, because I think we're being fuzzy. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and yeah, it's interesting because then we have tradition and theology as well, right? Handed down tradition and theology. Now we see this a lot within the church. So, for instance, why is it? And my wife and I were talking about this the other day. Why is it that Christians, so the Christian church as a whole, broad brushstroke here, predominantly says that the Saturday Sabbath is done away with? Well, I would hypothesize, and I would put forward the notion that this is handed down tradition. In other words, people have been taught this. If you really look at the evidence, I mean, if you really just look at the Word of God, the Sabbath is said to be forever. It's throughout all your generations. It's a blessing. It's, all these wonderful things. It's a gift from God, all this kind of stuff. And then if you ask somebody who thinks that the Sabbath has been done away with, you say, okay, well, show me where the Sabbath has been done away with. Well, they have two passages. They're going to go to a passage in Acts where it says that, and they met on the first day of the week. Now, that doesn't say anything about changing the Sabbath to Sunday or anything like that. And then they're going to go to Revelation where John says, and I was in the
Spirit on the Lord's day.
Spirit on the Lord's day. And once again, we have no evidence that this is talking about changing the Sabbath or anything like this. And so you have two proof texts that say nothing about the Sabbath. And
but
so
they see it that way.
But they see it that way because
they've been told. Is that what you're getting at? In other words,
they see it that way because of tradition. Is my point?
Because of tradition,
theological tradition, the handed down theological tradition. And I would,
right. In other words, they didn't come up with it on their own.
Right. Exactly. And they wouldn't. You wouldn't come up with that on your own.
But it started somewhere.
Well, I would also put forward that it comes possibly from a bit of anti-Semitism. Now, I'm not a person who's going to say that there's anti-Semitism behind every rock, but certainly if you look at Eusebius and some of the writings and what was going on, you have the church fathers who are clearly saying to Christians, don't celebrate the Sabbath, don't celebrate the festivals, because that's what the Jews do. And it might not necessarily be from blatant and I hate the Jews kind of anti-Semitism, but more from the idea of the Jews killed Christ. We want to be separate from them. We don't want to look like Jews in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. But even Eusebius keeps the tradition of Polycarp. I mean, he preserves the Polycarp, who was bishop of Smyrna, right? One of the seven churches addressed in Revelation.
And he was a 14er.
They kept the Pesach.
Yeah, on 14, on Nissan 14, right?
And Polycarp was a bishop of Smyrna, and Smyrna is one of the seven churches in Revelation to receive a letter.
I completely agree with you.
So you're right. There's a lot of things, and I think what your point is that the polemical nature between believing communities and Jewish communities that rejected the gospel, that Christians they lacked a few things. They lacked, all of us lack maturity in different areas, right? We're all growing in maturity, but we also lack access to best information.
Right.
God knows this,
but now we can take this to a now I would say that receiving tradition like that can be bad. It can also be very good. Okay, because we stand on the shoulders of the people who have gone before us, right? Now, with this said, you have people in various movements, various groups, Torah movement, Hebrew roots movement. You have people who think that they're standing on solid tradition, and what they're doing is they're standing on solid YouTube videos or unsolid YouTube videos, right?
Golly,
it's not tradition anymore. And I have personal friends who have fallen into this trap. They watch stuff on YouTube, and I get that this show is being broadcast on YouTube right now. But all I'm saying is, a lot of people in these movements, they'll call things like seminary, cemetery, but then they get their knowledge from Wikipedia,
Rabbi YouTube or Rabbi Google.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, man, so the levels of tradition, not all tradition is equal. Some tradition is.
Here's another thing I think about too, Caleb, is that, I'm teaching Greek, praise God, for TorahResource Institute now. What is this? This is my 10th year, I think, teaching it. And I've used Dr. Mounce's Zondervan, Basics of Biblical Greek every year, because his third edition, it's a great book. Well, 3 years ago, he came out, Zondervan came out with a fourth edition. And I'm so used to the third edition. I've got all my notes in my book, hand notes of the workbooks, all the work. I know that David, who wrote our email, he even went through first year he's got the same book. It's like now I'm having to shift because next fall, it's students over the last couple of years have said, it's getting harder to find the third edition copies because they don't make them anymore. So now I got to shift into a new. But here's the thing. I decided I'm going to stick with Mounts, because this would be an opportunity to say, you know what?
Right.
If Zondervan's moving forward, maybe I'll find a better curriculum. I said, you know what? I'm going to stick with Mounts. Why? Because I like his approach. He's not going to change it that much. But here's another thing that has to do with tradition is the rationale that Mounts gives for creating another Greek grammar. There's probably 50 different Greek grammar, New Testament Greek grammars out there.
Right.
Caleb, you're going through this with publication on your commentary on Acts, commentary on Colossians. There's thousands of commentaries already out there. So as an author, you're kind of in a tightrope. It's like, well, wait a minute. Should I just tell everybody to read all these other commentaries? Do I have a new thing? And I think part of our labor in the kingdom is to digest and learn from those who came before us, to digest and have it become part of us and part of our story now and what in the world we're confronted with now by God's grace, and that we then re-communicate again. And then sometimes we'll highlight and say, I really like what Tim Hague says in his commentary here. Or I like what, any of these scholars that we read, or say we disagree with them on this, but we seek to advance the conversation in a helpful way. And that's where tradition and innovation kind of cross over. It's right at that point.
Boy, I was going through this yesterday. I'm currently writing in Colossians 2, right? And not because Colossians 2 is my focus. The book of Colossians is what I'm actually studying in right now. So I'm preparing to speak on Colossians. Well, everyone in the Torah movement, knows Colossians 2 very well, and
right, it's one of those done away with passages, right?
And so I'm going through Colossians, and I got probably too many commentaries, if that's possible, because it's too hard to keep up with all of them. With that said, yesterday I just thought to myself, this is overwhelming. The idea of studying Gnosticism and trying to understand the Apollo cult and all these things to try to frame Colossians 2. And I'm reading, Robert Wall is probably one of my favorite commentators. And I'm reading him and I'm just thinking, this guy has done way better than I could ever do. Why am I even doing this? And, I was talking to Michael about it, and he said, you should ultimately, he kind of took me down off the ledge. Like, you should put a picture of these people, these specific people next to your desk. And the reason why is because I was saying to him, I'm not a good Greek scholar. I've taken Greek. I can stumble my way through some Greek, but I'm not a Greek scholar. And these guys are just far above anything that I could, they're explaining all these different, and this is the antecedent of this and the root of this and blah. And I'm thinking, why, I'm not going to be able to recreate this. And I had to think to myself, this isn't your audience. Your audience doesn't know any Greek, and they don't really care. So it's now my job, these other scholars have done all the Greek work. Now it's my job to take what they've done and to really kind of bring it down to.
Well, you know what? I just want to stop you right there. What's my job?
Right.
We each need to ask ourselves this question. I like to put it this way. What's my lane, or what's my wheelhouse, right? People say, what's in my wheelhouse, or what's my skill set? Why? Because God has for each one of us, right? That's what he's building his ecclesia. We're all like these living stones. And how are we a living stone? We're a living stone when we're alive in Messiah. Name of
it's the name of the church that I pastor.
Church
co-pastor.
That we're alive in Messiah, but we're stones in that we're being refined to be consistent, to have wisdom and skill and dependability on the skill set that God trains us each to walk according to the way he has for each of us to contribute to the whole. And it's going to be unique, and it'll be a blessing to others. And each one of us, it's incumbent upon us to seek the Lord first and foremost in all things, of course, but also to hear wisdom from others about our giftings and about our skills and what we have to contribute to God's kingdom. And that's our lane then. Then I stay in my lane. Right. And it's if we're on a highway, you see drivers who are like swerving different lanes, that's a person who's not clear. They're not focused. Right. And we're to do our job, to know what our job is and to do it as unto the Lord. Right. But if I don't know what my job is, how can I do it unto the Lord? Right. So I just wanted to pause there. Caleb's like, what's my job? And what I appreciate about what you're saying, Caleb, is that you're assessing the needs of the flock that are under your care and in your reach, right?
Well, here's the thing.
And you want to serve them, right?
Here's the thing about that, though, is that I think a lot of the time the natural inclination for any teacher is to try to do something that's not necessarily in their lane, as you would put it. In other words, we see all this cool stuff that we're into, and it's like, yeah, this is awesome because, oh, look at what they did in the Greek here. Like, I want to explain this. But ultimately, we have to keep reminding ourselves, this is not my audience. My audience isn't going to care about this. Anyway, let's pause for a few seconds. First of all, at the beginning of the show, I did not tell you you should subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already. Please go ahead and subscribe. We have a number of people who watch our videos and don't subscribe, so go ahead and subscribe. Also, you can be a part of the conversation by calling our comment line, 253-465-3205. It's 253-465-3205. And shoot us an email, chegg@TorahResource.com. And then also, Lee has given us a super chat, and we are always appreciative of our super chats.
Nice.
Thank you, Lee, for the super chat.
You've been blessed.
We also were sent a new sound clip. Now, I'm not going to tell you where this is from. If you know where it's from, then shame on you. And if you don't know where it's from, I'm not going to tell you. But this is the new sound clip that we have on the soundboard.
Whatever, I do what I want.
Yeah, so that's a fun one. Okay.
I do what I want.
I do what I want. All right. Let's now that we've talked about all of that, let's kind of jump into some of the other comments that we got. And so as we talk about these things, we need to remember and be specific about defining custom versus tradition. Jonathan writes in, he says, hey guys, thank you for all you do. I have a question pertaining to Passover since it's coming up. That's right. If you don't know, Passover starts on Shabbat. On Saturday is Nisan 14, which means at sundown is Nisan 15, hence another Shabbat. We get a double Shabbat in a row. 2 Shabbats in a row. It's the double blessing. Okay. And so he goes on, what is your take on, and we get, by the way, I should say, I know I keep interrupting myself, but I should say that we get this comment every single year. We address it every single year. And so for our longtime listeners, just hang with us here. What is your take on being circumcised to partake in the feast? I am drawing from Exodus 12:43 through 50. I understand that first and foremost, that a person must be circumcised of the heart. Also, I understand, and yeah, we see this in Colossians, right? Also, I understand that this passage in Exodus is the Lord speaking to Moses and Aaron, leadership, and not to individual people. I would disagree with that. The group my wife and I gather with does not have a leadership structure since it is a home group that can make decisions for the congregation as a whole. And so he goes on. So basically his question is should we have everyone be circumcised to celebrate Passover? I'm just going to address this really quickly, and then I'll let you jump in to wrap up anything if you want to. The answer is no. And the reason why is because the text tells us that people need to be circumcised to partake in the Passover lamb. The Passover sacrifice. It does not say that you need to, and we don't have the Passover sacrifice. You're not in Jerusalem. You're not at the temple. There is no temple. Even if you were in Jerusalem, you couldn't have the Passover lamb. I know that there are people who, in certain kind of fringe movements, who still say that they sacrifice the Passover lamb. This is nonsense. If you are not in Jerusalem at the temple, which doesn't stand right now, and sacrificing the lamb, then you don't have to be circumcised. There's nothing in the Torah that tells you that you have to be circumcised.
Right. And to put it positively, circumcision is required for participation in the official Pesach in Jerusalem. So, and we are in a diaspora situation where we're celebrating a memorial. On the other side of that, are we required to recite the words of Yeshua from the Last Supper during our Pesach celebration? What do you think?
So yeah, actually, this is a broader question. You've kind of opened up a bigger question too, because one of the questions is,
this gets back to innovation and tradition.
Yeah, and I've
Yeshua
often
institutes a tradition,
right? And I've often said that I believe that communion or the Lord's Supper or the Eucharist, however you want to say it, is not actually bread and wine that is eaten every time believers get together or every week at church or every month at church. I actually think that it is actually talking about the Passover meal. And so I have argued in unpublished writings. Yes, I know, I still need to publish it. I have argued in unpublished writings that we see in Luke the beginning of the meal. There's a blessing over the bread and wine. And then at the end of the meal is when he does it again, and he says, in like manner, after the meal, he took the cup and said, "Do this in remembrance of me." I'm paraphrasing, shortening up, but basically that's. And if we look in Date 9 tradition, dinner customs of the Greco-Roman era, this is actually standard tradition. And so what I argue is that is actually bookends of the entire meal. So I don't think that the elements of bread and wine are actually what he's talking about. In other words, take a cup and take this bread and do this specific thing in remembrance of me. I think he's saying do the entire Passover meal in remembrance of me.
That's exactly right. And my answer is yes, we are obligated.
I think so, yes.
So in other words, here, if there's a believer, and I've seen this, so I've seen where, and I did it when, like, this is over 20 years ago, when it was like, oh, Passover, then going to a Passover Seder as a Christian believer, where it was like a traditional Haggadah and no mention of Yeshua's words.
Right. Yeah.
Thinking, this is what a Passover is. And today I look at it like Caleb's talking about. This is Yeshua gives us instruction for how to keep Pesach, right, as a memorial unto him.
Exactly. So Josh writes in, and this is on the heels of this other question. Josh writes in and says, in episode 335 and 336, you talked about Passover tradition, specifically with regard to Jewish tradition. And I think that we will use the words tradition here because I think that this is actually handed down within Judaism, not within Christianity, obviously. So Josh is going to talk to this. But what about Christian Paschal tradition? Recently, I have been studying the history and theology of the Eastern Orthodox Church, as well as attending a service every couple weeks. And I came across an Eastern hymn that I like called the Paschal Troparion. I'm probably saying that wrong. I have been told that it was composed as early as the 2nd century CE. Ever since hearing it, I have been thinking about adding it to my community's Haggadah right after the reading of the Messiah's Passion, which is Matthew 26:17 through 28:20. Here's the text for the song, and this is what the song is. It says, "Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and to those in the tombs he is bestowing life." This is an interesting question because basically what I've done is as I've already said in show, 335, basically what I did was I tried to strip the Haggadah of anything that I thought was Jewish tradition, as it were, and then kind of reconstruct and put in the things that I thought were pertinent. And one of the things that I think is actually Christian tradition, and possibly started obviously as custom, but Christian tradition is the Afikomen, and we've talked about this numerous times on this show. So I don't think that that's Jewish tradition. I think that that's actually Christian tradition. I'm not going to tell anyone how to order their Passover Seder. I'm not going to tell anyone what traditions they should have or shouldn't have. In fact, the only reason that I made the Haggadah available that I created was because people kept asking for it. That was not the intent. I was not actually making that for other people. I was making it for my family. That was it. However, to Josh, this hymn that you have recited, I actually I want to do more research on this because I think that this is a great hymn that would be able to be added into a Haggadah. But what do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I think that's great. Again, we're talking about innovation in a way, or re-implementation, maybe, of different traditions. I mean, that's in effect what's happening. When I stopped observing Easter and shifted to becoming a quartodeciman, right? Yep. I mean, it's like in terms of my life trajectory, it's an innovation. It's like a shift, and I think there's more subtle ways of this. Is like saying, okay, I'm going to take something from the early church that I think is a beautiful poetic expression. You hold it up to the light of theological, principles or core doctrines, and if it cuts the mustard, it's why not include it?
Exactly. Okay, so we have a question in the chat room, and I think that this is an important question, so we will look at it. Love is Bigger says, can you all speak on Exodus 12:16, since the Pesach is having us make our meal on the Shabbat, especially since we have to make our meals to participate in it. And so basically what is, let me explain this for people who might not have ever celebrated Passover before. Normally, Passover, the majority of the time, I shouldn't say normally, the majority of the time, Nisan 14 falls on a weekday and not on a Shabbat. This year, it falls on Saturday. And so obviously we're supposed to rest and we're not supposed to do any work on the Shabbat. And so the question is, how are we supposed to prepare the meal for the Passover, which is the night of Saturday, if we're not supposed to do work like this on the Shabbat? And the reference that is being made here is Exodus 12:16. It says, on the first day you shall hold a holy assembly, and on the seventh day a holy assembly. No work shall be done on those days, but what everyone needs to eat, that alone may be prepared by you. Okay, this is a great question, and I've heard some people say, oh, well, we were thinking about not having our Seder on Saturday but doing it on Sunday. No, I think that actually there's entire discussions on this within the Talmud. Not that I'm saying you should go read those or anything like that, but I think that basically what we have here is the allowance to be able to prepare for the Pesach. Now, with that said, one of the things that I recommend to people, this is my personal recommendation, you can take it or leave it, crock pots are an amazing thing. And
I must, caveat here, Caleb is not an ordained rabbi.
That's true. That is true.
Okay. Now,
yes. Yeah. One of the things I love doing is taking either your lamb, your beef. I'm going to do a beef roast this year, and we have 3 families that are making the main dish, and then our entire community is getting together, and everybody's bringing something. So no one's preparing the entire meal. Everybody has like 1 or 2 things that they're doing. So I get to do the one of the main courses, one of 3 main courses. And every year we do tacos. And the reason we do tacos is because people can go through the line, put whatever they want on it. Everybody gets full. It's wonderful. So I'm doing a beef roast. I will wake up in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. I will put my beef roast into the crock pot. I will add a couple of things. I will turn it on. And then that's it. By the end of the day, people will be able to, I'll shred it right before we eat, and it will fall apart beautifully. And it will take me all of, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes in total. So this is one of the reasons that I think that crock pots are a blessing from the Almighty, because I can actually use them. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great verse, the passage from Exodus 12. And I would say, things that are light and like salads and things that you can pop in the fridge, do those Thursday and Friday. Get that stuff done and make it easy for yourself, and in a way it's you're just acknowledging that it is a Shabbat. But like Caleb just pointed out, this is that the feast of Pesach overrides the Shabbat.
That's right.
In this regard. It doesn't mean go to work, right? It doesn't mean go. It's not that kind of thing. It has to do with food celebration items.
Okay, and Lee brings up a great question. Don't tortillas have leaven? The answer is yes, if you use flour tortillas. However, corn tortillas do not have leaven in them. The rabbis say that you can't eat corn because it gives the appearance of rising, but corn does not have any leaven in it. So we use corn tortillas. Hope that helps. Okay, so we had a interaction on YouTube, and this was an interesting one. I don't know how you would say this person's handle on YouTube, Bruggy, Brugggy. Anyway, they wrote in that we were talking about tradition. And we were talking about tradition in regards to the Passover tradition, and how I believe that a lot of the Passover tradition was actually Greco-Roman meal custom. And we see this within the various writings of the Greco-Romans, dating back all the way 400 years before the first century. And so we can piece together kind of what the Greco-Roman meal customs were, and it looks pretty slam dunk here that the Jewish custom of the Passover, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, just took already established Roman Greco tradition and put their own meaning to it and said, oh, we had it first. And so this is what this person is responding to. They say, Messiah Matters, yes, it was late. They're talking about the Mishnah, because they said, yeah, well, the Mishnah was late. And I said, yeah, that's my point, is that the Mishnah and the Talmud are late. So we can't take those and read them back in the first century. And they say, yes, it was late to be written down, but it went back much further than that. That is the rabbinical writings. You could take a lot of Jewish customs and say, look, that was a pagan, Babylonian, Persian, Greek, or Roman custom. But why? Something as simple as reclining at a table is coincidental, and people like to try to compare things to pagan, Roman, whatever, other nations' customs to discredit it. Okay, hang on just a second. Now, I agree, especially within the Torah movement, the Hebrew roots movement, you have people who will find paganism behind every rock. Oh, Thanksgiving, pagan. 4th of July, pagan, right? The name Jesus, pagan. This is nonsense. These people they want to find paganism in every tradition. I'm not saying, and please don't, this is a very important point. If you've heard nothing else in this show, hear this. I am not saying that these traditions are necessarily pagan. The idea of reclining at table is not a pagan tradition. Just because something is Roman does not make it pagan. What I'm saying is that it was Roman tradition first. Not pagan tradition, Roman meal custom tradition. And the Jews simply adopted that custom as people would. So, for instance, we can see this within our own culture. I think that the majority, I would say probably 99% of people in America use forks when they eat dinner. That is a Western tradition. That is not a... So is that pagan? Is it pagan that we're using forks? No, of course not. It's a simple meal custom that we have adopted. If I lived in, say, Japan, I would probably use chopsticks instead. And if you're in the Middle East, oftentimes people don't even use utensils. People use their hands in a common bowl. So the point is first of all, yeah, you cannot say that the rabbinical writings go back to the first century. You need proof of that. So that's number one. Second of all, there's nothing wrong with the Jews adopting Babylonian or Persian customs or Greek customs if they are not pagan.
Caleb, the names of the months are a perfect example.
Exactly.
Because in the Torah, the months are just numbered. But by the end of the Tanakh, we have Nisan, right? We have these different months that are named according to the Babylonian name of the month. Those names of the months are not revealed from heaven. They are ancient Mesopotamian terminology.
Right.
And that's okay. There's none of the scribes or prophets are upset. They upset about idolatry, right? I mean, they're railing against idolatry.
Right.
But idolatry is not, or adopting pagan practice is not reflected just in something as simple as the name of the month.
Right. And so ultimately when we talk, so why is it important to point these things out? Well, it's important because what you have this pie in the sky idea that if it's Jewish, and this is from the Torah movement predominantly in the Messianic movement, if it's Jewish, it must be good.
If it's not Scottish, it's God.
Right. So, I mean, the idea is all things Jewish is good and holy, and the Jews have never ripped anything off. Everything that they've gotten is pure and holy because they're Jewish. This is simply not
so
true.
Good. Okay. Holy. Again, we're getting back to tradition and like Matthew 15, Mark 7. What what happens if I call something holy that God does not call holy? Is that idolatry?
Right.
If I start calling, one of the big things in the Second Temple period was the language of the sectarians, where all of a sudden they're calling Hebrew the holy language.
Right. Yeah, good point.
Now, wait a minute. Now, there's what happens then? There's a whole bunch of subsequent sociological consequences to their sect about that value now. That means other languages are profane. And now now all of a sudden you're training people to think through this major filter.
Right.
When Israel's Kohanim are commanded in the Torah to teach Israel the difference between the holy and the profane. And then you have this source out there muddying up the waters. It's kind of the reverse of what David's email was about. Now all of a sudden, where the Kohanim were teaching clearly the difference between holy and profane, you have people out there fuzzing up the boundaries by saying, changing what we call holy. And this is another topic, but I'm reminded of it.
So let me take this one step further. When we look at Israel within the Tanakh, and specifically, basically from the time that Israel gets the Torah on, right? You get into Kings and Chronicles and constantly. And this king did not walk with the Lord. Instead, he sacrificed his children on the high places and to the Baals and, all these different things. And this, king after king, and he didn't tear down the high places. And he was, and God did not find favor in him because he was worshiping all these other gods. Were those customs all good? And the idea is, Israel has turned from all that stuff, and now they worship the one true God. Let me tell you something. Do a study in Gnosticism, and Rob recommended this book to me this last week, Major Trends in Jewish Mysticism by Gershom Scholem. You want to have your mind blown on Gnosticism today? It's Judaism. Modern Judaism has just adopted a significant amount of Gnostic belief. It's really shocking. And so the idea that Israel has now turned to the one living God and that their hands are clean, there's no idolatry, I don't accept that. I don't think that's true. And so it's very important for us to say, are these customs that we're doing, are they legitimate? And I'm not saying that, please do not hear me say that, anything Jewish is pagan. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is we need to be aware that just because it has a kippah on does not make it biblically sound.
And we could say the same thing just because something says it's Christian.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, the Mormons are going to come and say they're Christians.
Right.
Right. I don't know. Do the Jehovah's Witnesses say they're Christian? I actually don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah.
I know that we have some of our friends and supporters also from the Ontario neck of North America,
right?
Came out of Jehovah's Witness, so they probably would have something more specific to say. Is the use of the word Christian within those circles? I'm not familiar.
I think it is, but the point is that I think that we see this in bloodline superiority theology. People I've heard people, even prominent quote unquote Messianics. Like Itzhak Shapiro will tell you, you're not Jewish, so you need to learn from a Jew, as if Gentiles can't study the scriptures or something. It's just ridiculous. Like all things Jewish are good, and which is nonsense. Can you put the book in the chat? I can screenshot it. Let's see here. The book that I was just referencing was Major Trends in Jewish Mysticism by Gershom G. Scholem. And the reason that this book is interesting is because, the reason that I found it interesting is because he's going to take the idea of early, and when I say early, I'm talking even before Christ, early mysticism. And we see this even with, so why is it that in Acts you have Simon the magician? He's Jewish. If there wasn't Jewish mysticism and Jewish magic, wouldn't people just say, yeah, that's pagan, we're not going to have anything to do with that? No. Simon the magician seems to have a pretty large following. And so we see this Gnostic, and we can look in, I'm going to tell you straight out, This is not like a page turner. This isn't something you're going to sit down and be like, oh man,
No,
I
and
can't
it
put
also,
it down.
it's what, 80 or 90 years old now, and from its original publication, I think.
I mean,
and there are some fine tuning that scholars subsequently from Scholem have said they're quibbling with certain points, but it's still a kind of a major early, middle or mid 20th century English text.
If you're not studying Gnosticism or Jewish mysticism, I'm going to tell you this will probably be a really good sleep aid, because it's not a page turner. It's difficult to read. With that said, some of the things that he talks about in here, I've done a lot of study in Hasidic Judaism, and now I'm doing study in Gnosticism, and I feel like I'm reading the same material. It's unbelievable how much, and the thing about Hasidic Judaism is that they haven't even changed the terms. They have not even changed the terms. The Gnostics believed that God had 12 emanations. Guess what the Hasids say about the 12 Sephirot? They're the 12 emanations of God. Right? I mean, and I could just go on and on and on. The point is that it's kind of shocking. I think that people don't realize the amount of what's gone into their texts and into their belief.
Right.
Okay.
And as a shameless plug, I have had a few emails since we've been mentioning this. Maybe next year, Lord willing, at TorahResource Institute, we'll do the Jewish mystical traditions class. So,
yeah, that would be awesome.
For which Scholem is one of the readings.
Okay.
But of course, it's a reading intensive.
Love is Bigger says Gnostics equals Essenes ? Yes and no. There is certainly some Gnostic belief within the Qumran sect, and actually in the work that I'm doing on Colossians right now, I actually reference some of the Qumran writings, and they certainly did have those kind of beliefs. We really start to see a formation and a better grounding of understanding within Gnostic belief into the early Christian period. Clement of Alexandria, for instance, has an entire hierarchy of angels. So humans become angels, angels become archangels. Then you get into the Jewish mystical writings in the 3rd and 4th century. Enoch becomes Metatron. Metatron becomes the lesser Yod-He Vav-He. And now you have people like Shapira trying to say that Yeshua is Metatron. I mean, this is
someone, who really, boy, you got to watch out for.
Right. Okay. So anyway, let's do one more. This is an interesting question. Giorno, I think is the name. So writes in, actually didn't write in. This is a YouTube comment. Dear Rob and Caleb, question on seeking a biblically sound congregation. This is something that I've been pushing hard recently. Do you think it would be better to go to a congregation where it is biblically sound overall, but don't keep the Torah? And I'm going to guess that when he says don't keep the Torah, what he means is don't keep a Saturday Shabbat, don't celebrate the biblical festivals, and don't keep a kosher diet. So don't keep those three things is basically where I think it is going. Rather than a Messianic congregation, so a biblically sound congregation that doesn't keep Torah, rather than a Messianic congregation where it upholds the Torah to the point where it overshadows Christ. Well, probably the ideal scenario is to have a Christ-centered congregation that also obeys the Torah, but ideal is not often available. You had a great response to this when I first read this to you the other day. Do you want to start?
I don't remember what I said, so you go.
You said anything that overshadows Christ we should run from.
Oh, gotcha. Right. I remember that.
And I completely agree with that. Basically, the idea is if you have a congregation and anything in that congregation is overshadowing Christ, then you should not be in that congregation. And I
don't, we'd have to look at that case by case, but what I would mean by that is you're going and there's like nobody's mentioning salvation by grace, by faith, Yeshua, of who Yeshua is, the incarnate Son of God who purchased redemption for his people, and our life is in him.
Right.
If you're not getting the core, and you could say, well, that's the core gospel message, maybe. If you're not getting that, then I would let the leadership know first off before if don't just pack up and leave. Try to make an effort to say, hey, where's Yeshua? Can we? What's going on here?
Here's the thing: is that everybody always gets upset when I say this. I would probably take a Bible-believing evangelical Reformed church with dual leadership over 85% of the Messianic congregations out there, at least. And the reason why is because I think that issues such as bloodline superiority are tantamount and just as egregious as a rejection of the Sabbath. I think that there are all sorts of issues that usually plague the Messianic congregations, people calling themselves rabbis, people using Hebrew word pictures, bloodline superiority, all sorts of stuff. And I think that those ultimately are, they are opposed to the true gospel. And so I think that the warnings against a different gospel are much more egregious or spoken of much more heavy than ideas of wrong interpretation of certain laws. Now, please don't hear me say that I don't think it's important that people keep the Sabbath or the festivals. I certainly do. But if you have someone saying, well, your kid can't be bar mitzvahed because they're not Jewish, and my kid is going to have a bar mitzvah next week because we are Jewish, and basically we're better than you, ultimately this is a offense against the gospel, because according to God, there is neither Jew nor Gentile when it comes to salvation. We are all seen as sinners, and then we are all seen as redeemed by the blood of Christ. So ultimately, I think that, and a lot of people do not like my answer to that, but I personally would often take a evangelical Reformed congregation over a Messianic synagogue. Rob?
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I think I have more experience with the different types of expressions of, quote, the Messianic movement than I do of different expressions of American Christianity.
Right.
And wow, there's a lot of craziness out there.
Mike just put in our chat room, you can't have tacos for Passover because you ain't Mexican. And that's like ultimately that's like bloodline superiority. It's like, oh, you can't keep the Sabbath because you're not Jewish. Anyway, keep going.
No, that's all. Yeah, that's funny.
I know a lot of people have really pushed against such claims by me. And admittedly, and maybe I should say this outright, I should say that we are blessed in our area. We live in one of the most liberal states in the United States. People are, the agendas of the LGBTQ plus, the agenda of, you should see some of the stuff that's going on in the public schools now. It's shocking. And we've even talked about moving because of how liberal this state is. With that said, within our general area, we have probably 4 or 5 solid evangelical Reform churches that I know the pastors of. They love the Lord. We get along really well. And they know where I stand on the Torah, but that has never really been an issue. Now, I know that that's not the case with a lot of people in a lot of different areas. We get calls all the time from people to say, I've been kicked out of a church, or, there's no church that I can find that will let me come, or whatever. So I understand that my situation may be different than others, but the Lord has really blessed us in our area and to find good believers. Anyway, all right. Passover, man. We going to do a Passover show next week?
We'll do a matzah. It should be a...
Yeah, we'll eat matzah.
Messiah Matters matzah. 3M.
Yes. All right. Hey, thanks everybody for the questions and for the comments and for being a part of the show. Thank you to the chat room. Always good to have you guys around. You keep us on our toes, and some great conversations that have gone on in the chat room. We certainly appreciate all of our producers. If you want to become a producer, our spring producership is coming up. You can become an executive producer by going to TorahResource.com and then clicking on or hovering over resources and going down to Messiah Matters. All the information is on that page. And that should roll over here probably in the next week or two. So keep your eyes open for that. We are also extremely, extremely grateful to all of our supporters. You can become a supporter for as little as $5 a month.
And thanks, Lee, for the super chat.
Yeah, thank you, Lee, for the super chat. We appreciate all of this goes into actually helping us keep this show on the air. And we will try to put something up, something new for our supporters in the supporters page within the next week or two. All right. Well, we certainly hope that this conversation has done at least one thing, and that is to glorify our great God and Savior, Yeshua the Messiah. Why? You know why? Because Messiah matters.